Hi guys, today I want to discuss my findings on Hindu Vimanas, which are mythological flying chariots or flying palaces describing ancient Sanskrit texts. Some consider them as recorded evidence of high-tech aircrafts, spaceships, or even UFO/UAPs, which existed in ancient times. The word Vimana literally translates to having been measured out or traversing. In Indian scriptures, they are often associated with the gods' flying chariots, which can travel everywhere at will. Occasionally, earthly heroes got to ride them as well. The Vimana is also an architectural term for a tower above the inner sanctum of a Hindu temple. The flying Vimanas were also said to be capable of traveling into space and in water, thus provoking the idea that these ancient flying machines could be transmedium spacecrafts, just like certain UFOs presented at the US Congress in 2022. Furthermore, there is an Indian document containing interesting drawings and descriptions of different types of Vimanas, which bolster the concept of the authenticity of Vimanas being ancient flying machines. A few years ago, some online sources claimed that the US Army recovered the remains of a 5,000-year-old Vimana in Afghanistan. Alleged quotations from Sanskrit epics further show that the ancient Indians had sophisticated astronomy knowledge and knew that the Earth is shaped as an oblate spheroid and the Earth circles the Sun. Like many people, I read such topics curiously and found them quite intriguing. However, after doing research, I realized we can't take these Hindu flying machine statements at face value, because among these assertions, some are purely falsified, some overlooked and mystified crucial elements, and some could be embellished translations and contemporary interpretations that took liberty from the original Hindu texts. In this video, I'll show you what I've uncovered, and you can make your own judgments on Vimanas. To start, I want to clarify that the story of the Vimana remains found in Afghanistan is most likely a fabrication. The reason being this news only contains a shocking title with no verifiable source, no reporter's name, no detailed location, no substance, and no person being interviewed. Some say this phony report was loosely based on the plot of a 2008 science fiction horror movie, The Objective, which revolves around an American Special Forces team encounters with paranormal incidents in Afghanistan. Isn't it very odd that the only rumored Vimana craft was not discovered in its homeland, India, but Afghanistan, even though India has so many well-preserved ancient temples and artifacts? In India, there are ancient artworks of the mystical flying Vimanas, but no real relic was ever found to date. Many have seen perplexing drawings of various Vimanas that look modern with furnaces, propellers, and electromagnets. Some believe this is proof of ancient Indian high technology. The original drawings came from a Sanskrit text, Vayamnika Shastra, which makes the claim that the Vimanas mentioned in ancient Hindu epics were advanced aerodynamic flying vehicles. In 2015, at the Indian Science Congress in a session on Vedic science through Sanskrit, a former pilot referenced this text as the basis that aviation technology had already been introduced in India 7,000 years ago. The problem is, this text, along with its drawings, is a modern time creation, a 20th century product written in Sanskrit. Almost 50 years ago, 5 young scientists at the Indian Institute of Science decided to check the vintage and veracity of the claims enshrined in these Sanskrit verses. They published a paper in 1974 titled A Critical Study of the Work Vayamnika Shastra. These Indian researchers concluded that the book was discovered in the 1950s and cannot be dated earlier than 1904. The crafts described in it are the best poor concoctions, rather than expressions of something real. None of the planes have properties or capabilities of being flown. The text and the drawings do not correlate with each other even thematically. They noticed that while the science of aeronautics requires the understanding of aerodynamics, the Vayamnika Shastra paid little or no emphasis on aerodynamics. Thus, although the text was written during the modern era, None of the technologies of different Vimanas in it would allow an object to fly, let alone to go to space. Humans have dreamed of flying and have attempted to achieve it since the earliest days. From kites, jumping with attached wings, to hot air balloons in the 18th century, our modern aviation has come a long way. During the 19th century, with the advancement of aerodynamics, wind tunnels, wing contours, and steam engines, aviation had gained heightened interest, and there were many publications and experiments of heavier-than-air crafts. Eventually, in 1903, the Wright brothers created the first sustained, controlled, powered, heavier-than-air manned flight, after a few years of serious and rigorous study and experimentation. The Wright brothers made their first public flights in Europe and America in 1908, bringing their invention to the masses. Airplane companies soon began to field teams to demonstrate the flying machines they produced. The public showed great enthusiasm for the airplanes as a symbol of human achievement. It's very possible that around this time, the 20th century Sanskrit Vyamnika Shastra of flying Vimanas were written with its purported claims and drawings that Vimanas in ancient Hindu scriptures were advanced flying machines. Now, what about the authentic Hindu Vedic scripts? They depict Vimanas as flying cars that can travel to space and in water, right? Okay, let's check out some of these translations. Please note that many Indian researchers consider that the flying chariots of gods are also aircrafts like Vimanas, even though they are not called as such, and most are portrayed being drawn by animals. For example, the existing Rig Veda versions do not mention Vimanas, but the verses known as the Rado hymn were taken as evidence for a spacecraft by the 19th century Indian philosopher and social leader Dayananda Saraswati. Dayananda Saraswati believed in the infallible authority of the Vedas, and he lived through the 1857 Indian rebellion against British rule. Later on, he founded a reform movement of Hinduism and inspired Hindus to aim for self-governance, nationalism, and spiritualism. He made critical analyses of religions, including Christianity and Islam, as well as of other Indian faiths, like Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. His commentary and interpretations on the Vedas have been highly influential. The phrases in the ancient texts that Dayananda deemed to be spacecrafts are translated by others as follows. Quote, "Along the dark course, tiny well-feathered birds, clothing themselves in the waters, flying up toward heaven. These have returned here as rain from the seat of truth. Only then is the earth moistened with ghee." End quote. Dayananda Saraswati interpreted these verses to mean jumping into space speedily with a craft using fire and water. Was that an accurate interpretation? I'll let you decide. Not coincidentally, another ancient paragraph that has often been cited as descriptions of ancient Hindu high-tech crafts that can go through water is again from Dayananda Saraswati. In section 10.19 of Yajurveda, the following was said to be describing Vimana movements. Quote, "O royal-scaled engineer, construct sea boats, propelled on water by our experts, and airplanes, moving and flying upward, after the clouds that reside in the mid-region, that fly as the boats move on the sea, that fly high over and below the watery clouds. Be thou, thereby, prosperous in this world created by omnipresent God, and a flyer in both air and lightning." End quote. It's rather surprising to see texts that are possibly over 3,000 years old use words like engineer, propel, and airplanes. So, I copied the corresponding Sanskrit sentences to Google Translate to double-check. The translation from automatic Google Translate reads very different. I know there are big limitations of Google Translate, though it could be useful as an objective tool to check out keywords. The Google translation reads as this. The boats are moving on the backs of the bull on the mountain. They cover their lips and follow the snake's intelligence. You are the Vikrama of Vishnu. You are the mighty one of Vishnu. You are the revolution of Vishnu. How could this be rendered as engineer constructed boats which propel water, and then airplanes. These two versions are quite different, and which one is more accurate? On another Sanskrit webpage of the same paragraph, I found out that the ones on top are the original Veda mantras, which translate similarly like the Google translation. The ones at the bottom are the commentaries of Dayanada Saraswati from the 19th century, and contains words of engineer, propel, and airplanes. As I mentioned earlier, the 19th century was the active incubating period of the ancient airplanes, with many papers and designs published and discussed in Europe and America. Living in colonial India, this well-known Hindu philosopher and social leader would have heard about these flying machine concepts, which might have influenced his writings on how to read the Vedas. Here are some exquisite earlier 17th to 19th century paintings and illustrations of the Hindu religion and scriptures. We can see that flying chariots and flying gods are drawn in a fantastical way, with horses and birds, wings, on clouds or floating carriers in the air. They do not resemble modern aircrafts, and they do not have mechanisms like engines or propellers, and they don't look like the typical UFOs. The famous Konark Sun Temple in India was built during the 13th century and presents a beautiful solar chariot with intricately decorated wheels, and most importantly, the chariot is pulled by horses. It appears that only when modern airplane designs and experiments became known by the public in the 19th century, the claims of ancient Hindu flying machines were introduced. The first and most quoted flying Vimana mentioned in existing Hindu texts is Pushpaka Vimana in the epic Ramayana. Pushpaka means flower. This Vimana was made by Hindu deity Vishwakarma for god Brahma. In the epic, the Pushpaka Vimana is referred a few times. I'll recite the one that has the most information of the vehicle. The translation I cite was written by Indian civil servant and historian Ramesh C. Dutt, who lived mainly in the late 19th century. He was one of the prominent proponents of Indian economic nationalism. The Vimana description came under the chapter of Return Home by the Aerial Car. Quote, "Mark my love," so Rama uttered, "as on flying Pushpa car, borne by swans, the home-returning exiles left the field of war." End quote. Borne by swans. Sounds like the flying Vimana was pulled by birds. Agreed? As for the so-called Agnihotra Vimana with two engines, and the Gaja Vimana, Elephant Vimana, I didn't find any reference online. If you know more about them, please leave me a comment. I want to bring to your attention that as in many oral epics, multiple versions written by various authors of the Ramayana survived. The Ramayana in North India differs significantly from that preserved in South India and the rest of Southeast Asia. Were there reinventions, reiterations, additions, and embellishments added to the text over the long history of thousands of years? Possibly. Can we take these scriptures literally, say to equate that the gods flying chariots to modern aircrafts? I doubt it. Don't forget that there are also many incredible characters in these Hindu epics, such as half-human, half-animal beings, and multi-headed and multi-armed deities. Are we going to take these portrayals as literal descriptions as well, like how the flying chariots were in essence like airplanes? Speaking of these Hindu magical chariots or flying cars, I can help relating them to similar vehicles from other ancient civilizations, especially the solar boats and the chariots ruled by gods and goddesses. This is a shared common concept across cultures in ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, China, and other regions, which represents an early attempted explanation on why every day the sun rises in one direction and goes down in another direction. For instance, according to the ancient Greek legends, Helios is the god and personification of the sun. The sun was put in a chariot driven by 4 white horses. Each day, Helios would drive the chariot all along the sky. That is how the sun would rise and set. Utu, also called Shamash and other names, is the Sumerian Mesopotamian god of the sun and divine justice. U2's vehicle was a solar chariot pulled by 4 animals, horses or mules. The Egyptians envisioned that the sun as traveling through the sky in a boat. Therefore, the sun god Ra uses a solar bark in ancient Egyptian mythology. The sun god Surya of India rides in a chariot drawn by 7 horses. In a parallel fashion, these cultures also have moon gods or goddesses who supposedly bring up the moon every night by chariots or other means. Such as Helios' sister Selene is the moon goddess who drives a chariot across the night sky. Since the sun and the moon rise and set in the air among clouds, our ancestors assumed they were traversing through flying boats or chariots. Even though not scientifically true, such mythological ideas are romantic and enchanting. Let me remind you, the Hindu word Vimana means having been measured out or traversing, and usually represents vehicles for the gods. If we can justify that Vimanas were in fact ancient aerodynamic flying machines, then what about the flying chariots or devices or magic carpets of other ancient cultures? Were they all aircrafts or spaceships? Some have proposed that the ancient gods were advanced beings or aliens from space. If there were such beings arrived via futuristic crafts and interacted with humans, then why didn't they inform ancient people that the sun and the moon are not carried on chariots to traverse the sky? And why did the ancients write that these gods ride on wheeled chariots pulled by animals, or depict them floating in the air with wings or on clouds? On another note, if these were really high-tech crafts in ancient India, either created locally or from extraterrestrial origin, then other Sanskrit texts showing an understanding of aeronautics were related subjects. Did ancient Indians possess higher knowledge that can support the idea of flying machines or airplanes? Even though no technical writings of these genres were found, some online sources say that the Hindu Rig Veda showcases astronomical information that is amazingly advanced for their period. That the Hindus from 3,000 years ago already knew about heliocentrism, the shape of the Earth, and the Moon was a subplanet of the Earth, etc. I checked some of these alleged Sanskrit quotes based on their reference numbers. Like this one, shape of Earth is like an oblate spheroid, which supposedly come from the Rig Veda Book 30, Hymn 4. Unfortunately, there is no Book 30 and no such verses in Rig Veda. It's fabricated. Another claimed paragraph from Rig Veda, Book 10, Hymn 149. The sun has tied the earth and other planets through attraction and moves them around itself as if a trainer moves newly trained horses around itself holding their reins. This hymn does exist, and here is an 1896 translation of the same sentence. Savitar fixed the earth with bands to bind it, and made heaven steadfast, where no prop supported. Savitar milked, as to a restless courser, air, sea, bound fast to what no foot had trodden. An 1866 translation is very similar. I copied the Sanskrit text to Google Translate, and the translation is, when the sun moved the earth with its instrument, the sun stretched out the sky. Like a horse, the sky is bound by the sun and the sea. Neither version sounds like the claim that the sun tied Earth and other planets through attraction, right? I also checked a few hymns said to be presenting the gravitational effect of solar system makes the Earth stable in Book 1 of Rig Veda. The 1866 and 1896 translations are again pretty similar, which read as follows. He spread the wide earth out and firmly fixed it, smote with his thunderbolt and loosed the waters. McGovern with his puissance struck down Ahi, rent Rahina to death, and slaughtered Vayamsa. The Google version is, he held the earth and struck it with a thunderbolt, and created a waterless space. The Indras killed the snow-covered Drayana, and killed Vayamsa with the Sachis. Hymn 115, 1896 version. This is the Godhead, this might of Sura, the sun god. He hath withdrawn what spread over work unfinished. When he hath loosed his horses with their station, straight over all night, spread out her garment. Do any of these translated quotes read like the gravitational force of the sun to you? Why are some translated versions so different from others? I'm not talking about the use of words, but the main gist and the information conveyed. As stated earlier, Google Translated Sanskrit may at minimum provide keywords and might be far from being accurate. Translating ancient Hindu texts is very difficult. It's inevitable that scholars from different periods and backgrounds would interpret the ancient scripts based on their individual understandings and perceptions. Moreover, the oral epics have multiple versions. Even with the same hymns, people, including Indian native narrators, translators, and readers, would have their own opinions, preferences, and interpretations. The sublime Hindu epics and scripts are full of wonderful stories with artistic and poetic depictions. I can see how and why someone would use modern ideas to comprehend certain phrases of the ancient texts. But can we take these interpretations as a convincing evidence of ancient Hindu aircrafts or flying machines? I don't believe so. Our history is amazingly complex, and we have much to learn and investigate. It's not entirely impossible that there were ancient flying machines in the distant past. I prefer, however, to see tangible proof of this. What's your opinion? If you have any insights, please leave me a comment. If you like my video, please subscribe to our channel and share with others. You can also support me on Patreon, which is a monthly charge, or on Buy Me a Coffee. I appreciate your support. This is Curious Being. I'm Tina. Thanks for watching and see you next time.